Hello and welcome. I am Exolite and this is my channel. Today I'm going to tell you about a man. His name is Joe. And he seemingly disappeared off the face of the planet in a national park. Before we get started, let's do the housekeeping, shall we? If you would please give this video a thumbs up, it really helps my channel to be seen. If you are not subscribed and you would like to be, please do so. And if you do, please click that bell and you'll be notified when my content goes live. Also, if you're enjoying the 31 Days of Halloween, there is a button below this video and it says thanks, and it's basically a tip jar. It's not necessary, but would be appreciated, as most of my content is not monetized, it's probably pretty obvious why. So let's get started, shall we? On July 8th, 1999, Joseph, who went by Joe Wood Jr., was 34 years old, and he drove alone to the Mount Rainier National Park to do some hiking, some bird watching. It was supposed to be minimal activity, an enjoyable day of relaxation and watching birds. He was never seen again, and there was no evidence that he was even there. Mount Rainier has been the scene of many mysterious disappearances. But today we're going to focus on Joe. Joe Wood Jr. was an African-American editor of the New Press, a New York publisher and former editor of the Village Voice, that had flown to Seattle on July 7, 1999, to attend a Unity 99 national conference for minority journalists. Joe was a Yale graduate, and in 1990 he had received a New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship, which enabled him to travel to Ghana and publish a book, Blood Whispers and Color Lines. As a young man, Joe was fond of nature, the outdoors. He joined the Boy Scouts. He eventually reached the highest scouting award of Eagle Scout. It's very hard to do. As a result, he had a very, very good knowledge of the wilderness. According to his family and friends, Joe had a heart condition. He had only discovered it a few months prior to his disappearance because he fainted at an airport. He had been considering getting a pacemaker, but he was otherwise healthy, fit, and this was only going to be a mild walk to watch birds. On July 8th of 1999, Joe drove to Mount Rainier National Park, 60 miles southeast of Seattle. He entered the park at 12:29 p.m., according to a car park receipt. He drove to the Longmire area and started to trek, heading towards Mildred Point. He was not equipped for a lengthy hike, and he was only dressed in a light shirt. He was carrying binoculars and a bird book, and the weather that day was perfect in the park. Joe's 3-hour hike would have taken him through dense forests of western hemlock and Douglas fir. It had 4 to 6 foot high compacted snow blankets that partly covered the trails. The Longmire area and Ramparts Ridge Trail are at the southwest side of Mount Rainier, at a crossing where Pearl and Devil's Dream Creeks meet. At 4,800 feet, it goes on to 4 small lakes. When Joe failed to reappear again at the conference, friends were surprised, though not particularly alarmed. But when he didn't return to New York on Sunday, July 11th, his ex-partner, Somini Sengupta, a reporter for the New York Times, who was also at the Unity Conference, raised an alarm. Somini and other friends of Joe traveled to Mount Rainier and followed Joe's route up the mountain. They tried to reach the place where he was supposedly last seen, but the trail was buried in snow, and rangers advised them to head back. Now, it's July. It is not snowing. But if the compacted snow was too tough for the search to get through, even though that was where Joe was last seen, then how is it possible that Joe made it? Why would he climb over a 6-foot snowbank that was frozen solid. By Tuesday, July 13th, Cimini had filed a missing persons report with the Mount Rainier National Park Service, and the next day, park officials found Wood's rental car in a Mount Rainier parking area. On July 15th, park rangers were contacted by a hiker whose name was Bruce Gaumond. He recognized Joe in a local newspaper story and called them. Gaumond said that he had met Joe on the Rampart Trail at an altitude of about 4,800 feet on July 8th at around 2 p.m., and they had spoken briefly. Joe had asked whether the snow-covered trail continued much further. Bruce told him he'd gone up another 5 or 10 minutes but turned around at a snow bridge which looked very dangerous to cross. The two men were not on the main trail, but were following other people's footprints. Bruce came down the mountain immediately after their conversation. In the winter of 1999, Mount Rainier was covered by very heavy snowfall. But then, as much as 2 feet of snow melted in the warm and sunny days following Joe's disappearance, which meant that any tracks had disappeared. The National Park Service organized search teams of backcountry rangers, firefighters, and volunteers. Squads with dogs moved out across the southwest face of the mountain, and helicopters crossed the peak. On Friday, July 16th, heavy rain began to fall, which might sound like a familiar situation to those who know of the people who go missing in national parks. But the rangers were encouraged by the weather when it had improved, so they decided to extend the search by 1 more day. They found 0 evidence of Joe, and eventually the search was called off. They were convinced that Joe would have succumbed to the elements with his light clothing and lack of food or shelter. They believed hypothermia would have been inevitable. So, what did happen to Joe Wood? Well, given the excellent weather conditions on the day that he went hiking, which were said to be perfect for a short hike to go bird watching, it seems very strange that he disappeared without a trace. If there had been a blizzard or fog had come in on the day he vanished, it would be an understandable result that the severe weather conditions that hit Mount Rainier from time to time could have been responsible for his death, but the snow melted significantly just after he went missing, so if he did fall down a ravine or a creek bed, he should have been visible. So if he had fallen into the river at the snow bridge, it would have been very likely that he would have been easily discovered, whether that be alive or his body. It would have floated down the river. Bruce Gaumond, the hiker who Joe had met, would have given researchers a clear area to search in, but there was no evidence of an animal attack. There was no blood. There was no clothing. There was nothing disturbed. Could he have been killed or abducted by a person or persons unknown? Perhaps. But there was no physical evidence recovered at all apart from his car parked in the spot that Joe had left it. I don't know how much physical evidence there would be of an abduction if done quickly. But I do know that Joe went there, Joe was seen there, and Joe was never seen again. Thank you for coming to my channel, and good night.